3 days ago, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter delivered by courier. The return address? My father's house. The same house I hadn't stepped foot in since I was 17. The same man I hadn't spoken to in nearly 15 years. And the kicker? He died last week. The letter was part of his will. Apparently my father, after all these years, wanted to clear the air. But before I get into what the letter said, I need to rewind. I, 32M, have a twin sister, Elise. Or rather, had a twin sister. Elise died when we were 17. The official story was suicide. Pills. Bedroom. A quiet, tragic ending for the brightest girl I ever knew. But I never believed it. And now neither do I. Because the letter my father left me, it didn't just clear the air. Tore it apart. The letter was written in my father's neat, slanted cursive. The kind that looked like it belonged in a military logbook, not an apology. It began with a line that sent shivers down my spine. If you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, it's time you knew the truth about Elise. I read that sentence 3 times. My hands were shaking. My wife, Jenna, sat across from me on the kitchen table asking what was wrong. I couldn't speak. The letter continued. Elise didn't kill herself. Not exactly. She was trying to escape. Escape? From what? My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone this before. Not even Jenna. But the night Elise died, she knocked on my door. Her eyes were puffy. Her hands were trembling. She wanted to talk about him, our dad. But I told her I was tired. I told her to just sleep on it and we'd talk in the morning. Except there was no morning. Just sirens. Crying. Our mother on the floor. Elise upstairs, cold. The letter went on. She found out about something she wasn't supposed to know. Something about me, about what I did when she was younger. She was going to tell someone. Maybe even you. And in that moment, I saw everything unraveling. So I made sure it didn't. I dropped the letter. I was shaking. Jenna picked it up. She read ahead. She gasped. Then she whispered, "He killed her." And that's when I realized something horrifying. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was confessing to murder. I stayed up the entire night rereading the letter, trying to decode every word like it was some kind of map to the past. My wife Jenna sat with me in silence, one hand on my shoulder, the other holding back tears. She didn't know Elise well. She'd only seen pictures. But she knew how broken I'd been for years. And now she was watching it happen all over again. I kept asking myself, what did Elise know? What could be so damning that our father, a man who preached discipline, morality, and family values, would kill his own daughter to silence her? The next morning I made 2 calls. One to my Uncle Jared, Dad's younger brother, long estranged from the family. And the second, to a lawyer. Because the contents of that letter weren't just disturbing, they were potentially criminal. When I met Uncle Jared at a diner on the edge of town, he looked rough. A man who'd seen too much and said too little. But when I showed him the letter, his face turned pale. He whispered, "She knew about the basement, didn't she?" I froze. Basement? Jared looked around nervously. Then he leaned in and said something that made me feel like the ground beneath me wasn't real. "Your father used to take her down there. Said it was Bible study. But Elise told me once, when she was 9, that it wasn't." My stomach flipped. I remembered Elise refusing to go to church for a while. I remembered her locking her bedroom door. I remembered her cutting her hair short and throwing out all her dresses. And I remembered Dad screaming at her for being disrespectful. I thought she was just rebelling. I was a kid. Now, I know better. After I left the diner, I drove straight to my parents' old house. It was technically mine now, part of the estate I didn't even want to claim. But I still had the keys. I'd never planned to step foot in that house again. But something inside me said I had to see the basement for myself. The neighborhood hadn't changed. Same neat lawns, same nosy neighbors. I half expected my father to be standing on the porch with his arms crossed like he always did when I came home late as a teen. Instead, the house was quiet, empty, dead. I walked through the living room. Everything was exactly the same. Same recliner. Same yellow lamp. Same cross on the wall. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the back hallway, and there it was. The basement door. Still locked. But not for long. I found the old key ring my father used to wear on his belt, still hanging by the kitchen, and after trying 3 keys, I heard the click. The door creaked open, releasing a puff of stale, cold air. The kind that settles in places no one visits anymore. I flipped the switch. The light buzzed and flickered on. Wooden stairs, cement floor, metal shelving, and then I saw it. A wooden chair in the center of the room, bolted to the floor, with leather straps attached to the arms. There was a video camera on a tripod facing it. Next to it, a locked filing cabinet. One that I forced open with a crowbar I found in the garage. Inside, dozens of tapes, all labeled with names and dates. Some said Elise. Others, other names I didn't recognize. All girls. And suddenly I knew Elise wasn't the only one. But she was the one who fought back. I didn't want to watch them. Every cell in my body screamed not to. But I knew I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. I took the tapes labeled Elise and one other marked Rachel, 2001, and played them in the old VHS player still hooked up in my father's den. I sat there, alone with a bottle of whiskey I hadn't touched in 2 years. The first tape started with static. Then my sister's face. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11. Her hands were tied to the arms of the chair. She looked directly into the camera and whispered something. I paused, rewound, played it again. Please make it stop. I turned it off. I vomited. I broke the tape in half with my bare hands, shaking so hard I couldn't breathe. Then I played the second one. Rachel. She wasn't family. She looked even younger. And suddenly everything clicked. My father had been abusing not just Elise but other girls too. Somehow he'd gotten away with it for decades. And Elise? She must have found the tapes. Maybe she found Rachel. Maybe she tried to help. And he killed her for it. I wanted to burn the whole house down. But I didn't. Instead, I called the police. And I called Rachel. Yes, I found her. She was real. 27 now. Living in another state under a different name. I found her through an old yearbook photo that matched a Facebook profile. I told her everything. Who I was, what I'd found, what my father had done. She cried. Then she said, "You have to expose him. Even now. Especially now." And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to the funeral. I was going to the press. The funeral was set for Saturday. Closed casket, full service, military honors. My father had served in the Navy when he was younger, and the town still treated him like a hero. He had a reputation as a God-fearing man, a pillar of the community, and a loving family man. What a joke. That same day, the local newspaper published a glowing obituary my mother had written. It painted him as a devoted father, deeply grieved by the loss of his beloved daughter Elise. I felt sick reading it, so I wrote my own. I submitted it to the same paper, the day before the funeral, with the headline, "The Truth You Never Knew About Peter A. Collins." In it, I laid everything bare. Elise's death, the tapes, the basement, Rachel, my father's confession. I included one still image, blurred, from one of the tapes and the fact that I had submitted everything to the police. The paper called me 3 times trying to verify it. I gave them my lawyer's number. The obituary ran online Friday night. By Saturday morning, all hell broke loose. Half the town refused to go to the funeral. The other half showed up in angry silence, whispering rumors and side eyes. And then my mother called me. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She said 5 words, cold and calm. "You should have burned the tapes." I nearly dropped my phone. She knew. All this time, she knew. After she said it, "You should have burned the tapes." There was a silence so thick it made my ears ring. I finally choked out, "You knew." Her response? Mothers always know. Some things you choose not to see too clearly. For survival. I felt like I was talking to a stranger. I asked her why she stayed. Why she let it happen. Why she didn't protect Elise. Why she never said anything. She replied, Because I had 2 children to feed, a house to keep, and a man who controlled everything. Bank accounts, reputation. Who would have believed me? I told her she could have protected Elise. She could have left. And then she said something I will never forget. I didn't think he'd hurt her that badly. That badly? Like some abuse was okay? Like a little trauma was acceptable collateral? I lost it. I yelled at her for the first time in my life. Screamed things I never imagined saying to my own mother. Told her she didn't deserve to be called that. She hung up without a word. Then I started getting the messages. My cousins, my aunts, childhood friends, church members. Some of them were supportive. Most were not. You should be ashamed of yourself. How dare you smear a man who's not here to defend himself? Your sister's death was tragic, but she's gone. Let it rest. Let it rest? Elise never got to rest. She died trying to speak up, and I refused to be the second person in this family who stayed silent. After the article came out and the funeral exploded into chaos, I figured the worst had passed. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got an email. No subject line. No signature. Just a sentence. I was one of them. I'll talk. Attached was a photo. It was grainy, scanned from an old-school yearbook, but I recognized her face instantly. Marissa Blake. She was a year below us in school. Shy. Always alone. She had vanished sophomore year and never came back. Rumor was she got sent away after some kind of family problem. I never thought about it much back then. Now, I was terrified to ask. We met in a park 2 hours away from where she lived now. She had changed her name and moved across the country after leaving foster care. She looked at me with a mix of suspicion and pity. And then she said it. He hurt me. More than once. But Elise tried to help me. She left a note in my locker once. Told me she believed me. Said she was going to do something. My throat tightened. I didn't believe her, she said. But then she died. And I thought, maybe she did. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Faded. Yellowed. Handwritten. It said, "You're not crazy. I know what he does. I'm gonna make him stop. Don't be afraid." I nearly broke down right there. Because Elise knew. She saw. She risked everything and no one believed her. Until now. Marissa agreed to testify publicly. She wanted her name to be known. She said Elise gave her courage. And now it was her turn to return the favor. And I knew. This wasn't just my sister's story anymore. It belonged to every girl he hurt. And now the world would hear it. By the time Marissa's interview aired on the local news, it had already gone viral. Clips were shared on Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. Elise's name started trending. Hashtag Justice for Elise. Hashtag Exposing Peter Collins. Hashtag She Tried to Tell Us. People were angry. People were listening. Survivors, not just from our town, began to message me with their own stories. Some had vague memories of my dad volunteering at Sunday school or leading youth groups. Others had more direct, horrifying memories. And still, somehow, people defended him. He was a God-fearing man. There's no proof. This is just cancel culture attacking the dead. But then, late one night, I found something in my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. An old picture of me and Elise at our 10th birthday party. Smiling in the backyard. Scrawled across it, in red marker, were 5 words. Keep digging and you're next. I stood frozen on my porch for what felt like an hour. I don't know how they knew where I lived. I hadn't posted my address anywhere. But someone had found it. Someone close. Someone angry. I called the police. They took the photo, said they'd look into it. But I knew what that meant. Nothing. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to the bed. Jenna begged me to stop, to drop it all, to delete the posts, to move on. But I couldn't, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elise, standing outside my bedroom door, 17 years old, asking to talk, asking for help, and I didn't answer. This was me answering. The day after the threat, I got a knock on my door around 6 a.m. It was Uncle Jared. Same tired face. Same nicotine-stained fingers. But this time he looked nervous, like someone had gotten to him. "I need to talk," he said. Jenna was asleep. I brought him into the garage just in case. He paced, rubbed his hands together, and finally said, "You're not the first person he threatened." I froze. "When Elise died, I got a call from your dad the next day. He said if I ever opened my mouth about what I suspected or what I knew, that I'd end up like her." I asked him what he meant by that. What exactly did he know? He hesitated. Then he dropped it like a bomb. "Your father did the same thing to me, when I was a kid, before you were even born." The room spun. "That's why I left," he continued. "That's why I stopped coming around. I thought he'd changed. Then I saw the way he looked at Elise one Thanksgiving. And I knew." I was silent. He went on. "He never let anyone in that basement. Not even your mom. But I snuck down once. Saw things. Equipment. Polaroids. When Elise died, I knew it wasn't suicide. I knew. But I was a coward. I wanted to scream at him, hit him, thank him, everything at once." "You think your dad worked alone?" he said. "He had help. People looked the other way. People still are." He gave me a flash drive. That's everything I've kept. Names, dates, notes, stuff I never had the guts to show anyone. I opened the files later that night. One of the names stood out. A local sheriff. Retired. Another? A teacher from my middle school. And then a third name I never expected. My mother's cousin. They all visited the house. Some were recorded. It wasn't just a predator. It was a ring. And Elise? She had started to figure it out. That's why she died. The more I read, the more my head spun. The files from Uncle Jared were a complete revelation. There were dozens of names. Men, women, local authority figures, teachers, even a few well-respected community members. They were all connected to my father in some way. Some had been to the house under the guise of family visits or business. Others were former students, now grown. Some names had photos attached, grainy, old-school Polaroids of children at various ages, looking scared or lost. But the most chilling file was one labeled, "The List." It wasn't just a list of names. It was a timeline, dates, times, places. The last one was dated 2 days before my father's death. And what stood out most? My mother's cousin. He had been at the house 2 weeks before the funeral. The file listed a specific meeting in the basement. I felt like I was suffocating. I had no idea how far this went. My father wasn't just a monster. He was part of something much darker. And now I had a decision to make. The local police couldn't help. Hell, they were involved. I had already tipped off a local journalist. But the media was starting to back off too. They were scared. That's when I knew. I had to go to the FBI. But doing that meant putting a target on my back. It meant dragging Jenna into this nightmare. It meant I'd be exposing the very people who had protected my father all these years. I stood in my kitchen, holding the flash drive, my hands trembling. The weight of the decision felt unbearable. I could leave it all behind, let the darkness stay buried, and pretend it was over. Or I could make sure it all came crashing down once and for all. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat on the counter, the weight of the decision pulling at me. Jenna had fallen asleep beside me on the couch, but I knew she was just as haunted by what I had discovered. She had been with me every step of the way. But this was different. This was dangerous. The next morning, I reached out to a contact at the FBI. I had to be careful, the wrong word, the wrong person, and everything could collapse. I explained the situation briefly, carefully, and made it clear that I had evidence, hard evidence, that needed to be looked at. I told the agent that it was a matter of urgent public safety. The name I gave him wasn't a well-known agent, but someone I'd been referred to through one of my sources. He responded with cold professionalism. He said I would hear back from him within 24 hours. I didn't want to wait. I had no choice. At exactly 10:23 p.m. the next night, my phone rang. "This is Agent Harper. I need you to come with us. We're setting up a full-scale investigation into your father's network. We'll need you to identify the names and locations you found. You'll be under protection." For your safety. My stomach dropped. Under protection? My first instinct was to run, to hide somewhere far from all of this. But then I remembered Elise, the countless names on that list. I couldn't stop now. The next few days were a blur. I had to pack quickly, leave the house, and make myself available to the FBI as they began their operation. I couldn't even tell Jenna where I was going. The less she knew, the safer she'd be. I was whisked away to an undisclosed location. A safe house. The first time the FBI showed me the full scale of their investigation, I was shocked. They had already traced the names back to other states. There were corroborating reports of abuse in several cities. The web of predators wasn't just a local issue. It was national. Some of the men on the list had already been arrested, and their testimonies revealed even darker truths. It wasn't just one ring, it was a network. It had been operating for decades. But I wasn't prepared for the part that made my blood run cold. The FBI had confirmed that my mother's cousin, the one who had been with my father at the house right before he died, was still active. He was a key figure in the operation. I felt betrayed, even more so than before. It had been a week since I was moved into the safe house. The FBI was already making arrests across the country, and the news was slowly picking up steam. The names I'd uncovered from my father's network were finally being connected to other survivors, some of whom had never spoken up before. The weight of all the stories, all the pain, was finally being heard. I thought for a moment that maybe justice would be served. Maybe my family's dark legacy would be washed away, and Elisa's death wouldn't have been in vain. Then came the phone call. It was from Agent Harper. "You need to come with me now." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my things and was escorted to an unmarked car outside the safe house. The ride was long, and the silence felt suffocating. When we arrived at the FBI office, Harper was waiting for me. He led me into a small conference room. I felt uneasy. "We've uncovered something," he said, his voice low, "and I'm afraid it's worse than we thought." I sat down, trying to steady my breath. "What do you mean?" I asked. He handed me a file. My heart sank as I saw my mother's name on the first page. "We've been tracing the network for a while now, and we believe some of your family members may have been involved. More than just your father." I felt the room spin. I'd already learned the painful truth about my mother's cousin. But now, the agent was telling me something I wasn't prepared to hear. "Your mother, Peter's wife. We believe she was complicit." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it. It was impossible. She couldn't have known. Not after everything I'd just learned. "We have evidence," Harper continued. "We're still gathering the full details, but the connections between her and the network are clear. She protected your father, and possibly more." I stood up. My legs were shaking. No, I couldn't let myself believe it. "That's impossible," I said. "She couldn't have." But Harper cut me off. "We found emails, documents, even photographs. She helped cover things up. Her involvement wasn't direct, but she enabled it. She chose to look away." I felt betrayed, crushed under the weight of it all. I couldn't sit still. The news hit me harder than anything else. My mother, the woman who raised me, who I had defended, trusted, and loved, she wasn't just ignorant. She was complicit. I needed to see her. I had to confront her to get answers, even if those answers tore me apart. The FBI had already told me that they couldn't arrest her yet. They needed more concrete evidence, but I wasn't going to wait. Couldn't. I needed to hear it from her. Jenna tried to stop me when I called her. "You can't go back there," she said, her voice shaky. "You don't know what she might say." But I couldn't hear any more of this through the FBI's filtered reports. I needed to look her in the eyes. I drove back to the house, the place that used to be home, the place that had been a prison for Elise and me. When I arrived, the door was open. My mother stood in the doorway, her face pale. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked like she'd been expecting this moment for years. "You're here," she said softly. "I knew you'd come." I didn't know where to start. The anger, the disgust, the confusion. It was all too much. I pulled the file out of my bag and shoved it into her hands. "Why?" I managed to choke out. Why didn't you protect us? Why didn't you protect Elise? She looked at the file, then at me, her eyes cold and empty. I couldn't protect her, she said, her voice cracking. You don't understand. He was powerful. He controlled everything. He controlled me. I didn't know how to fight him. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, to tell her she had the power to leave, to protect her children. But instead, I just said, you knew what he was doing to us. She nodded slowly. Yes, but I was afraid. I was afraid of losing everything. And Elise, she became so strong, so determined to stop him. I knew she was going to expose everything, but I didn't want to lose her. I thought if I kept quiet, I could keep the family together. Couldn't breathe. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. So you chose to look the other way, to let him keep hurting us. She lowered her head. Yes, couldn't stop it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to walk out and never look back. But a part of me, a tiny broken part, still felt for her. She was my mother. She had been the one to kiss my forehead when I had nightmares as a child. She had held me when I was sick. But now she had held my sister's killer in her arms and chosen to protect him. I stood there for what felt like hours, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Finally, I turned away. I can't forgive you for this, I said, my voice trembling. I walked out without looking back. The days after that confrontation with my mother felt like a blur. I couldn't go back to the safe house. I couldn't hide anymore. The FBI had made their moves, arresting the remaining members of the ring. But I was still processing what had happened, what I had done, what I had lost. My mother was taken in for questioning. She wasn't arrested, not yet, but she was under investigation. They had enough evidence to build a case against her for aiding and abetting, but whether or not she would face trial remained uncertain. I was forced to make the hardest choice of my life. The press had been relentless. People who had once admired my father were starting to question everything. A few brave voices had stood up in support of Elise and the other victims, but the weight of it all still felt crushing. The emotional toll, the legal battles, the media frenzy, the endless testimonies was all consuming. I visited the courthouse where the trials were being held, standing in the back, watching the survivors, each one telling their story, facing their abusers with unflinching courage. There was something undeniably powerful about seeing these people reclaim their voices, despite the horrors they had endured. And then there was me. I thought about Elise every single day, about the girl I had failed, the girl who had tried to protect others, and the girl who had paid the ultimate price for standing up to a monster. The day of the final trial came, and the courtroom was packed. The jury had already convicted the remaining members of the ring, but there was still one final matter to resolve: my father's estate. As part of the settlement, the house was sold. Everything inside was cataloged, including the basement, which was sealed off as evidence. That place, that prison, was gone. And then, I received one last piece of news. Jenna had finally convinced me to meet with her family, something I had avoided for weeks. When I arrived at her parents' house, I found a quiet haven waiting for me. Jenna had filed for divorce, but she wasn't leaving me out of anger. She couldn't be with someone who was constantly walking toward the darkness. She was trying to protect herself and her future. I understood. In the weeks that followed, I found myself in a new place. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. There were days when the pain of losing my sister, losing my family, felt unbearable. But there were also moments when I saw glimmers of hope. Survivors had found their voice. People who had been silenced for years were finally being heard. I started working with organizations that helped victims of abuse, sharing my story where it was needed, hoping that one day the cycle of secrecy would be broken, for good. My mother faced trial, but it wasn't the public spectacle I had imagined. The court proceedings were quiet, her fate decided behind closed doors. I never spoke to her again. Some wounds I knew couldn't be healed, but Elisa's memory lived on. Not as a victim, but as a warrior, a girl who fought even if it meant losing everything. And now, because of her, people could finally begin to heal. The truth is a heavy burden to bear, and sometimes it destroys everything in its path. But it also frees us. I've learned that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And I'll keep fighting for the ones who didn't make it out.